She thought she had found love. Instead, she walked straight into the arms of a predator. Nancy Hartz was 72 years old. A widow. A mother. A grandmother. She had spent most of her life caring for others, building a home filled with warmth and love. But when her husband passed away, something changed. The house felt emptier. The nights felt longer. And the loneliness, it crept in little by little, until it became unbearable. She wanted companionship. Someone to talk to. Someone to share quiet mornings and long drives. Someone who would make her feel young again. Then she met him. It started with a message on a dating site. A man named Ray. He was charming, attentive, said all the right things. He listened to her. He made her laugh. He promised her adventure. A life outside of the same four walls she had spent years trapped inside. And Nancy? She believed him. She told her family about him. Told them she had met someone special. But they were worried. Who was this man? Why was he moving so fast? Why was he pushing Nancy to leave everything behind? But love has a way of blinding us to the truth. So, in June 2015, Nancy made a decision that would change everything. She packed her bags, sold her home, emptied her savings, and she left. She climbed into Ray's RV, ready for the adventure of a lifetime, ready for love. But then, she was gone. The phone calls stopped. The texts went unanswered. Days turned into weeks. Weeks turned into months. Nancy's family begged for answers. But Ray? He had disappeared too. And when the truth finally surfaced, it was worse than they ever could have imagined. Because Ray wasn't Ray. He wasn't the man Nancy thought he was. And Nancy? She was just one of many who had walked into his trap, never to return. Nancy Hartz had always been the kind of woman who put others first. She had spent her life being a loving wife, a devoted mother, and later, a proud grandmother. But after her husband passed away, the house she had built with love suddenly felt too quiet. Too empty. The days dragged on. The nights were worse. She missed the conversations, the laughter, the simple comfort of having someone beside her. Her family visited when they could, but it wasn't the same. There was a loneliness that settled deep in her bones, one she couldn't shake. And then one day she made a decision. She turned to the internet. She had heard stories, people finding love online, starting fresh, even at her age. Why not her? She wasn't looking for much. Just someone to talk to. Someone who would listen. Someone who would make her feel alive again. And that's when she met him. His name was Ray. At least that's what he told her. His first message was simple. Hey beautiful. I hope you're having a great day. It had been so long since anyone had said something like that to her. Ray was charming, funny, and kind. He told her he was a man who had seen the world, who had lived an exciting life, and now he just wanted someone to share it with. Someone like her. Nancy was flattered. She hadn't felt this way in years. And Ray? He knew exactly what to say. He called her every night. Sent her sweet messages in the morning. Told her she was special. Told her she deserved more than just sitting in an empty house, waiting for time to pass. At first, Nancy was hesitant. But Ray was patient. He listened to her talk about her late husband, her children, her regrets. And then he painted her a picture of a different life. A life filled with adventure. A life of freedom. You don't have to be alone, Nancy. You don't have to stay stuck in the past. Let's get out of here. Let's go on the road together. Just you and me. Nancy had never been the impulsive type. But something about Ray made her want to take a chance. And then he asked her for something bigger. Sell the house, baby. You don't need it anymore. We'll have each other. That's all that matters. Her family thought she was making a mistake. They begged her to slow down, to think. But Nancy was already convinced. For the first time in years, she felt alive. So, in June 2015, she did it. She sold the house. Cashed out her savings. Packed her bags. She left everything behind. She climbed into Ray's RV, smiling, ready for a new beginning. Ready for love. And then, just like that, she was gone. No more phone calls. No more messages. Her children waited. They called. They texted. Nothing. Days passed. Then weeks. At first, they told themselves she was just busy. That she was caught up in her new life. But deep down, they knew something was wrong. And when they finally started searching for answers, they realized Nancy wasn't just missing. She had walked straight into a nightmare. Nancy Hartz had vanished. Her family's calls went unanswered. Her messages stopped. At first, they tried to stay calm. Maybe she was just busy. Maybe she was enjoying her new life with Ray. But days turned into weeks. Weeks turned into months. Something was wrong. Her daughter called over and over. No answer. Emails, voicemails, texts, nothing. Nancy had never been the type to disappear. She loved her family too much. She wouldn't just cut them off. Then, a horrifying realization sank in. Nancy wasn't ignoring them. She couldn't answer. Panic set in. Her children contacted the police, desperate for help. They begged for an investigation. But there was a problem. Nancy was an adult. She had left willingly. She hadn't told anyone she was in danger. Still, something didn't add up. The police started digging into Ray. But Ray didn't exist. His name wasn't Ray at all. His real name? Robert Lawson Carnochan. And Nancy wasn't the first woman he had charmed, manipulated, and made disappear. 2 other names surfaced. 2 other women. Verna Clayton. Neva Jane Lindley. Verna was 73 years old. She had been a widow just like Nancy. She had met a man online, someone who made her feel special again. Someone who promised her a fresh start. And just like Nancy, she had sold her home, withdrawn her money, and left with him. Her family never saw her again. Neva Jane Lindley was 77. Same story. Same pattern. Same man. She met Ray. She trusted him. She gave up everything to be with him. Then one day she was gone. Vanished. 3 women. 3 families left with nothing but questions. And one man who had all the answers. Robert Lawson Carnochan. A con artist. A liar. A predator. The police started piecing together his past. He had used multiple fake names, scamming women across the country. But this wasn't just about money. This was something darker. The families of Verna and Neva had spent years looking for them. They had posted flyers, hired private investigators, pleaded for help. But Carnochan had covered his tracks too well. There were no signs of the women. No bodies. No evidence of what had happened to them. And now, Nancy was gone too. Her family went public. They spoke to the news. They told the world about their mother, about the man she had left with, about their growing fear that she would never come home. People listened. Others came forward. More women had encountered Carnochan. More families had been torn apart. But no one knew where he was. Nancy was still missing. And the man who had taken her? He had vanished into thin air. Nancy Hartz was still missing. Her family had done everything, called the police, searched for leads, begged the public for help. But nothing. Months turned into a year. Then 2. And then, finally, a break. 2016. Police tracked down Robert Lawson Carnochan. He wasn't hiding in the shadows. He was still on the road, still living in his RV, still preying on women. But they weren't arresting him for murder. Not yet. They had him on fraud. Identity theft. Theft from the very women who had disappeared. Inside his RV, investigators found stolen credit cards, fake IDs, financial records belonging to multiple women. A paper trail of deception, proof that he had drained their accounts, stolen their homes, and left them with nothing. But what they didn't find was Nancy. There was no body. No proof of what had happened to her. Just like Verna. Just like Neva. Carnochan refused to talk. He sat in his prison cell knowing they had nothing to charge him with. Nancy's family waited. They wanted justice. They wanted to know the truth. But the truth wouldn't come from Carnochan. It would come from the desert. 2019. A hiker was walking through a remote part of the Arizona wilderness, miles from civilization. The kind of place no one just stumbles across. And there, in the dirt, something caught their eye. Bones. The police were called. The area was searched. And slowly, a horrifying discovery was made. The remains belonged to a woman. An older woman. Shot to death. 4 months, investigators worked to confirm her identity. DNA testing. Missing persons reports. Family interviews. Then finally, they had a name. Nancy Hartz. After 5 years she had finally been found. But it wasn't the answer her family had prayed for. She hadn't just disappeared. She had been murdered. She had trusted the wrong man. She had believed his lies. And in the end he had thrown her away like she meant nothing. Her family wanted justice. They wanted him to pay. But fate had other plans. 2020. Robert Lawson Carnochan was still sitting in his prison cell, serving time for fraud. The case against him was being built. Prosecutors were ready. They had the evidence. Then he was gone. Carnochan died in prison. Before he could be charged. Before he could face a single day of justice for what he had done. Nancy's family never got the answers they deserved. They never got to hear him admit the truth. And worst of all, they weren't the only ones. Because Nancy wasn't the only woman he had taken. And 2 others were still missing. Still waiting to be found. Nancy Hartz was finally found. But there was no justice. No trial. No last words from the man who had stolen her life. Her family sat in silence, staring at the news reports, the case files, the pictures of the desert where she had been left to rot. They had begged for answers. Begged for someone to listen. Now all they had was grief. Her daughter spoke through tears. She just wanted to be loved. That's all. And he took that and destroyed her. Her son couldn't even find the words. He just shook his head, staring at the floor, trying to understand how this had happened. But Nancy's family wasn't alone in their pain. Because Verna Clayton and Neva Jane Lindley were still missing. Their families had been waiting just as long. Waiting for a sign, a clue, a body. Years had passed. Nothing. Their stories were the same as Nancy's. Lonely widows looking for companionship. They had met a charming man online. They had trusted him. Given him everything. Then, they vanished. No goodbyes. No explanations. Just gone. And now that Nancy had been found, murdered, their families feared the worst. Did they suffer the same fate? Were their bones out there, buried in the dirt, forgotten? Carnochan had died with his secrets. But the truth was still out there. Somewhere. And then came the final, chilling question. Were there more? 3 women had disappeared. But how many more had fallen into his trap? How many families had been left in the dark, waiting for someone who would never come home? Police believed there could be others. Women who never told their families about him. Women whose names never made the news. Women whose stories were never heard. But with Carnochan dead, the answers died with him. There would be no confessions. No remorse. Just an open wound that would never heal. Nancy's family, Verna's family, Neva's family, they were left to pick up the pieces. But one question would haunt them forever. How many more women never made it home? Nancy Hartz thought she had found love. A new beginning. A chance to feel wanted again. Instead, she walked straight into a nightmare. She wasn't careless. She wasn't reckless. She was just lonely. She was human. And that's what predators like Robert Lawson Carnochan count on. They don't break into homes in the middle of the night. They don't wear masks. They don't lurk in dark alleys. They smile. They charm. They make you feel special. Then they take everything. Nancy's story isn't just about one man. It's about a world full of people like him, predators hiding in plain sight. They exist in dating apps, social media, even in the safest corners of our lives. They study people. They learn what you need, what you're missing. Then they become that person, until you trust them completely. And once you do, they take your love, your money, your life. Nancy's family never thought this would happen to them. Neither did Verna's. Neither did Neva's. But it did. And somewhere, right now, it's happening again. Another woman is sitting at her computer, reading a message from someone who seems kind. Someone who understands her. Someone who makes her heart race again. And she has no idea that her life is about to end. Nancy Hartz is gone. But her story isn't over. Because as long as predators like Carnochan exist, this will never end. The only question is, who will be next?